other people, but they will flow during presentations. And we're very happy to have you here. Some partners, friends, future colleagues, and hackers or just believers in Eth2 and staking. We'll start with Alon, and we'll talk about secret shared validators and SSV network. Then followed by Vasiliy from Lido, and finishing by Tomasz, working on the Eth2 MEV integration. So thank you very much for coming tonight. And without further ado, Alon.
Perfect. Should I speak with this one or?
Up to you, man.
I'll pick with this
Both
one.
works.
Great. Everyone can hear me, right? Perfect. So I want to talk with you about secret shared validator as a technology we've been working on the past 12 months. It's actually started as a research project by the Ethereum Foundation and kind of finds its way now to a testnet and moving forward, of course, to mainnet. Before we start, how many of you guys staked on a testnet or a mainnet in any way, on Ethereum, of course? Perfect, okay. How many of you not via a pool, right? Like literally ran an infrastructure or just one, two? Okay, three. Perfect, okay. So I'll try to maybe give a wider background on staking in general and the challenges. And so secret shared validator is as I've mentioned before, is a technology which tries to redefine the infrastructure for Ethereum staking. And more specifically, it will attempt or hopefully succeed to enable stakers, pools, institutional staking services, and so on and so forth, and basically anyone who's running a validator on Ethereum to decentralize and distribute their infrastructure. And that's pretty important. And it uses two main technologies which are pretty well proven, which is threshold signatures and BFT, or a consensus protocol, right? So why is that important? It's really, really important because in the core of the way Ethereum staking was built was the fundamental idea, which is one validator, which is 132 ETH validator equals one vote. And that's coupled with two other aspects, which are try to attempt as much as possible to avoid economies of scale. That is, if I have a lot of Ether, I have more influence per validator than anyone else has. And of course, decentralization. Those are really the key things that from the beginning the designers in the Ethereum Foundation really wanted to give staking on Ethereum. Economies of scale is really a big thing, maybe even connected also to MEV, which is one of the aspects which are more challenging, let's say. But economies of scale is really the definition of proof of work consensus protocols. That's why you see a lot of the proof of work protocols like Bitcoin and even Ethereum today really controlled by a few pools, because it makes more, you can make more money working as a group than as an individual. And that's exactly the economies of scale we're talking about, which cause centralization. And it's even more important if you look at the future of staking on Ethereum. We're really running towards the merge and afterwards withdrawals, which will be enabled on the Bitcoin chain. With the merge specifically will increase significantly the rewards validators can have, and of course that will lead to more validators joining in, and so on. As more validators joining in, more services will come online and offer staking. And of course we have challenges which are fairly new, like MEV coming into the space and has particular challenges in staking in general. All of those things are really showing that the trajectory for Ethereum staking is very rapid growth. I mean, we're seeing it today. We already have 6.4 million ETH at stake. That's much more than I think anyone anticipated this fast. And so that's really important. And there's a lot of challenges around, but kind of my focus is the infrastructural challenges, or rather, how do you actually run infrastructure which can scale to those types of endpoints or those types of numbers we're talking about? And the infrastructure is basically how do I run an Ethereum 2 or Ethereum validator. What do I need to do both in terms of an individual, but also and maybe mostly as a business, staking business, an institutional business, a pool or any other configuration. The way they run their infrastructure is paramount to the security of the network. We saw, for example, slashing events in the past. We saw hiccups, quote unquote, where bugs in the implementations caused a lot of nodes to go offline. Those things really influence the end user and the security of the network. And as of now, the number one factor that influences the way infrastructure is designed and built is the slashing conditions. That's the biggest threat. That's what everyone is trying to avoid. If you are an individual, you want to avoid slashing because you don't want to lose money. If you're a company, you don't want to get slashed because it will influence if your company can be successful or not, and of course your reputation and so on. And so almost all of the different infrastructural designs from Coinbase, the biggest, or Kraken, the biggest custodial stakers, all the way to the small person running a one validator, all of the design decisions are around slashing. And which a lot of that is revolving around single point of failures and centralization. And it looks something like that. And so you have in the middle what is called the validator client, which is basically just a piece of software running and coordinating the execution of duties for one or more validators. Basically going to the Bitcoin node and saying, what are my duties next epoch? What should I do? And signing accordingly. And not by mistake, the validator client is just one instance. You cannot run more than one instance of that validator client with the same validator keys because you'll risk slashing. And that's exactly a single point of failure. If you imagine a big enterprise like Kraken running thousands and thousands of validators, at the end of the day, they're running a few of those validator clients. Depending on the capacity of each validator client, they distribute them. But every single one of them is a single point of failure. If that validator client crashes, nobody attests anymore or execute transactions. If the server on which the validator client gets hacked or gets some malicious activity, then somebody can get slashed or have their money harmed or stolen. And a lot of that boils down to do's and don'ts with the current infrastructure. So of course, don't run a single validator key in multiple instances, you'll get slashed. Running validators in multiple parallel clients, even if some of those clients are offline or dormant or just backup, don't do that. We saw big services getting slashed by accident by doing so. So the entire idea of trying to build a robust infrastructure with redundancy and all of those things we are used to, that's not something which is advisable. Each validator client needs to maintain its own slashing protection, back it up, and persist it. If they fail to do so, they're risking slashing. And of course, the ultimate thing is your validator key needs to be online 24/7, which is, again, a big thing in the crypto space, as we are all got used to actually having our keys getting put into cold storages. And I will even go as far as to say that most of the design today really goes against experience of software development the past 30 years. Like anyone who's built anything always tries to think of how do I do it robustly, how do I separate it into different services, and those services maybe run on multiple devices or multiple machines to have redundancy, back it up, and so on and so forth. A lot of the things we're used to in software development, you cannot do with the current infrastructure in staking, and that's really limiting. By the way, as an anecdote, most of the slashing we saw the past 7 or 8 months since the Bitcoin chain was launched, most of them are accidental slashings. I can't really remember any malicious slashing happening. Most of them are just accidental. Most of them are somebody did something which internally, benignly, which caused slashing, and that's a major factor. And so, how do we go from here to something more robust? And for me, the answer is SSV. SSV looks like this. So first of all, graphically you can see there's no more single point of failure. SSV works by taking a validator key, splitting it up into secure shares, and those shares can be operated by independent, trustless operators. And by independent, I mean they can be completely different entities in completely different geolocations, running completely different technology stacks, which, as you can imagine, distributes in a very significant way, distributes the infrastructure. And by doing so, you gain a lot of value. So first of all, the big one is the validator key doesn't have to be online anymore. The shares do. The actual full validator key doesn't have to be. And that's a major, major value, I think, in my opinion. We're using threshold signatures for security. That is, if you go back and see all of those different operators, or SSV 1, 2, 3, and so on, each one of them holds a share, but in order to actually sign anything, they need to coordinate together and sign it together with some threshold. And of course, there's no more single point of failure, and we're using a consensus layer to coordinate between those operators to create fault tolerance. And fault tolerance really means that if one of those operators or more, depending on your configuration, is faulty, that is, it's offline, it got hacked, it's malicious, nothing really happens. The system continues to operate, the system continues securely to execute duties and earn rewards for the validators. And another layer of that is the SSV is built as a network, and so that infrastructure is ready to go. So anyone who's building a new staking service can use that infrastructure and not try to reinvent the wheel. And anyone who already has a staking service can adopt SSV pretty easily and to use something which is more robust. And there's a bunch of ways you can configure it. It's very much dynamic in that sense. And so that's really the kind of the advancement forward, the way we try to redefine what infrastructure for staking is. Going from a single point of failure where you're very much constrained by the protocol, how do you do things, to using technology to distribute it and make it a much more robust layer of infrastructure, and also make it in such way that it's reputable. Like you can, in repetition, go and do other services can build on top of it. They don't need to reinvent the wheel. And so that's SSV in a few words, but what I wanted to do is actually go a step further and kind of try to describe how it actually works in real life. Like what will be the experience from both the validator or the staker point of view, but also on the other hand, how will the operators look like, right? I mean, we have today the operators or the staking services. What will be different for them, and what will be different for the actual stakers? And so, if I have a 32 ETH validator, and I can be a DIY user, I can be a pool, I can be a staking service, anyone who's really running a 32 ETH validator. And it doesn't really matter how those 32 ETH got there. It can be pooled, it can be institutional money, it doesn't really matter. The way I will interact with SSV is pretty simple. I will take my validator key, I split it into secure shares. And that can happen offline, it can happen in any machine you want. It's off protocol. That is, you can decide how you want to do that as long as you do that correctly. And those shares are assigned to operators. A validator can choose 3 F+1 operators. That is, they can choose 4, 7, 10, and so on operators. And of course, the more operators you have, the more fault tolerance you have built into the setup. And once you assign them those secure shares, that's about it. They start to coordinate between themselves. The nodes pick it up automatically, and they start executing the duties for you. You don't have to run any extra hardware. You don't actually have to run anything. You can manage all of that. All of the registry and so on are smart contracts. So you can manage them as if you're managing something very simple like interaction with a smart contract and offline. And that's about it. And you enjoy distributed infrastructure. And also, you can enjoy better performance. Because we have redundancy built into the protocol, because we have fault tolerance, you could expect higher stability, higher effectiveness, and in the end, higher rewards. And of course, the keys you have are in cold storage. I think that's a pretty big thing. And that's from the validator point of view. From the operator point of view, the company or the person actually running the SSV code, they get access to a much wider network, right? If you have 4, 7, 10 operators per validator, you get a chance to be selected by those users. If you do a good job, if you build reputation and so on in the network, you can get selected. The more you get selected, obviously, the more revenue you have as an operator. And that's a really interesting thing. It taps into a much larger audience than you would have otherwise. And I think the big thing for the operator, if we mentioned before that slashing is by far the biggest consideration to anything we do in staking on Ethereum, then using SSV reduces significantly the operational cost and risk for anyone who's running infrastructure. Because you're working with other people as a team. If you, excuse my French, literally, if you fuck up, nothing really happens because you're working as a committee. If you go offline for some reason, then nothing really happens because you're working as a committee. And I will even go as to say that, I would definitely imagine times where one of the operators communicates to the community saying, you know what, tomorrow at 4 p.m. I'll have 30 minutes downtime for maintenance. And again, nothing happens. Like, it continues to execute duties because we have the committee, because we have the coordination via the consensus layer. And I think that's a big upside. So you reduce significantly your risk and cost, and you increase the amount of revenue you get. And that's a really interesting and smart business model. And so all of those things really, in my opinion, are kind of infrastructure 2.0 for Ethereum. And it's all wrapped up in a DAO which does a few things. One of which is really coordinate a curated list of those operators, right? The best operators, we want to be able to communicate who they are, why they are one of the best, and so on and so forth. So a curated list controlled by a DAO really enables that. And of course, you can extend that list. I mean, that list is controlled by a DAO, but anyone can build their own list. It's more about the infrastructure and less about which operators you choose, because that really depends on the configuration. Like, you can have maybe something as big, a corporation running 100 different operators on different continents and so on and so forth, and they manage their own curated list of operators. But at the end of the day, if they are all connected to one network, that's where the magic happens, and that's where the network effect happens. And of course, continuing with protocol and governance and grants and so on to continue development for SSV, because it's very much an ongoing project. If more innovation comes from Ethereum, quote unquote Ethereum 2, then SSV will have to adopt stuff like proof of custody and sharding and all of those things. We'll have to adopt the protocol to do that. And so development is definitely continuous in that regard. And I'm happy to say that all of those things sound great, but in the crypto space, there's a lot of times a big difference between ideas and dreams and reality. And so I'm very happy to say that we're actually hitting a testnet, a real live testnet, with everything I've talked about. Being an operator, being a validator, choosing operators, running validators, and so on. We gathered a great group of partners which will help us bootstrap the testnet. That's actually happening this week, and in the next probably 2 weeks we'll probably announce it. And first we want to see everything is working well, but we'll announce it in 2 weeks. So this is very much something that is happening. It's not a pipe dream. It's not something which will happen in a few years. It's definitely happening, and I think it's definitely the right timing. If we're talking about the merge happening towards, end of year, Q1 of next year, I think the merge, if it symbolizes a really rapid growth in staking, we should definitely rethink the way we do infrastructure, because if not, I think we'll see a lot more accidents happening down the road. And in order to actually merge successfully and continue with Ethereum scaling, going towards data sharding and so on, we need good infrastructure. And it starts with choosing the right technology to do so. And so, yeah, thank you. If we have any questions. Anyone? Yeah?
I just wanted to ask, what are the main kind of risks and challenges that you see in this approach? So
Yeah, I think number one is complexity, because we are adding complexity to the system. So, the validator client today is pretty simple. Most of the heavy lifting goes into the beacon node. By design, what will happen is that the SSV node will sit between some kind of a, let's say, modified validator client which does signatures and the beacon node. And so you're adding complexity. Complexity can add latency, complexity can add issues, and so on and so forth. And so I definitely see that as a challenge. It's actually not just complexity, it's actually non-linear complexity, because as we go further with Ethereum 2, things are getting more complicated than previously. And so, if we're looking at, let's say, 1 or 2 years in the future, so the biggest challenges you'll have, which are challenging everywhere, but it's specifically challenging if you're adding another piece of software, is the merge with its additional duties, and then you'll have data sharing, withdrawals, MEV, and if we go even a bit further, you'll have proof of custody, which again adds another thing, another job the validator needs to do, and so on and so forth. And so, although Ethereum 2 by design needs to be MPC compatible, it wasn't really tested. Like, proof of custody was designed to be MPC compatible. Will it hold 50 operators? I don't know. Probably will hold 7 or 10. 50, maybe, maybe not, because the algorithm is pretty heavy. And so it's going to be tricky. But I think that I definitely think it's worth it, because the opposite of that will be, okay, let's not do that. And I think what will happen is that you'll see more centralization, and I think even we are one of those operators, running helping running the network. That's challenging. Like, you have literally, if something goes wrong, best case scenario you're offline, and worst case scenario is even worse. And so we need to do something about it. I think SSV adds complexity, but it's as simple as possibly we can do that. We can make it. Yeah.
And what about slashing database? So as far as I understand, it should be synchronized between different validators that run. No?
So each operator holds its own slashing database. Mm-hmm. What happens is that the operators only actually sign something which is applicable to the beacon chain only when they pass a commit round for the consensus protocol. Mm-hmm. And so literally after they agree to sign something, they actually sign it. Okay. And so and any operator goes online or offline and so on, they need to sync with the other operators. And so the slashing database is really local, and you trust the consensus protocol that if somebody signs something, then at least 2/3 of the operators agree to it. And if nothing was signed, then no 2/3 operators agreed to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, but then the slashing database will have the log of all validators of other providers as well? Or?
No, not necessarily. So we actually adopted the networking topology of Ethereum. So you'll have subnets and an operator which, for example, let's say you have 4 validators. If I'm, as an operator, assigned to validators 1 and 2, I don't necessarily need to listen to 3 and 4. Though you could listen to 3 and 4. And also you can compact the actual signatures. You don't have to hold all of the network messages. And so what I will imagine will happen is that you will have operators or nodes that basically which gather all the information. So for example, we are running an Explorer node which basically taps into all of the network and registers everything that happens. So that kind of node will be heavier because it needs to register everything. But the other nodes only listen to what they need to listen, and so that's really as heavy as you make it. Yeah.
And do you have which validator client do you support, and is there any you don't?
So currently we don't support any of the validator clients. That's like the next project.
Okay.
The beacon nodes we support Lighthouse, Prism, and Teco for the moment. I think Nimbus is joining the testnet, so we'll start supporting them as well because they're using the standard API. The next big thing is to actually integrate natively with the different validator clients. And so you could literally take let's say a Prism beacon node and a Prism validator, put SSV in between, and they talk with one another natively. You don't have to do anything. Currently, the validator side doesn't exist yet. It's something we need to still develop.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, what's the latency increase in SSV compared to regular validation?
So I think like in 4.7 or 10 operators, it's kind of the same. We're talking about half a second, something like that to get to a consensus. Of course, if you have, so the consensus is really modeled after all of the BFT consensus, but generally speaking, you have to have 2/3 online in order to sign anything. So if you have 2/3 online, it will take you about a second. If you have less of that, then they wouldn't be able to sign it, so it will take more time. We haven't tested larger groups just yet. I actually don't see an application which will require more than 10. I think like 10 is really, really like, you know, if you're Lido and you say, you know what, we're managing 600,000 ETH validators, choose 10. But other than that, I mean, it's very, very heavy. Latency is 1 second, and it should stay there. We'll run stress tests after we launch the testnet, and we'll publish it. The previous testnet we ran was pretty lightweight, so I wouldn't take it as benchmark, but it had like 98 or 99% zero inclusion rates, and the 1 or 2% is because everyone used the same node, and the node was crappy and so on. So we'll benchmark it definitely. I would imagine it will stay half a second, a second.
That's geographically distributed.
Currently, I'm talking half a second, it's geographically distributed. So our setup now is 4 continents, each node on one continent, and it takes half a second, a second. If you have it in local, it will take nothing. It will take much less.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one more question. Is like how much data? So, for instance, right now the beacon chain, the blocks are relatively lightweight. They have essentially nothing there, right? After the merge, the block will get pretty beefy. So, will it affect in any way the data that gets transferred between the validator and between these nodes that needs to get consensus?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. It could. I don't think it will take a long time, again, because, I mean, if you look at the current network distribution for Ethereum, so how long it takes a block to reach 25%, 50%, 75% of all the nodes, you're talking like really, really fast. The nodes themselves, the blocks themselves are not that big. And I wouldn't imagine they will increase it. It will definitely add something because now you're just broadcasting nothing. It will increase that. We'll have to test it out. I don't know yet. I would say that like that's a question that always pops. The reference I'm taking is is Cosmos, really, because it's the closest one I can get. Cosmos has around 100 operators, validators. It has the basic same structure for consensus, 3 rounds, and so on. And it manages in 2 seconds or so. And I think the blocks are bigger there. I think they're half a megabyte there, where in Ethereum it's probably half of that, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so the deadline is 4 seconds. Like if it's more than 4 seconds, we're doomed. I wouldn't imagine it will go there.
One more question. You said that one of the huge advantage of protocol is that you can keep validator's key in a cold storage. Yeah. But for staking pool, maybe it's more interesting to have like distributed key generation ceremony. Yeah. Do you support this or? So
DKG, or the way you generate, DKG stands for distributed key generation. Key generation is actually out of protocol detail. So as long as you generate a valid BLS key, that's fine. DKG comes above the actual protocol. And so DKG is even going a step further, right? It's like nobody has the key and you need some kind of a consensus layer to do so, to actually sign something. I would imagine that the SSV DAO should give grants for developing it. So you have a bunch of DKG flavors, and I would imagine it needs to propose some kind of a grant and say, you know what, if somebody wants to develop it, we're willing to finance it. I think it's important. Yeah, definitely. Anyone else?
Any other question?
Yep.
Ready?
Thanks.
And tomorrow I'm going to give a longer talk about the challenges of actually getting there. So what we want to do, what are the challenges we're facing, etc. So if you want more nitty-gritty things, so that's for tomorrow. Today the mostly introductory thing. To understand where I'm coming from here, so I'm CTO of P2P.org. It's a pretty prominent staking provider. I'm working there from February 2020. And basically, Lido, the proto design of Lido was the second thing I did on the job, because like it's pretty clear that 2020 was the year the Ethereum staking launches, and it will be the most important thing that will happen this year for proof of stake node operators and maybe ever. So for everyone in 2020, don't know. So I know how staking works. We work a lot on that. We understand the market, the people who stake, the protocols, the infrastructure, etc., etc. So, and I am a co-founder of Lido protocol. We designed and launched it in December, and we are remaining one of the team that maintains the code for it. So yeah, again, I kind of know what I'm talking about here. So what is Lido? Lido is a DAO that builds a family of liquid staking protocol for everything basically worth staking, starting with Ethereum. That is our heartland and our headquarters on Ethereum, and that's what me and my team are working on. We've got about 650,000 of Ether as of today in stake, and that's a bit less than 2 billions, depending on the price right now. So $2 billion, I mean. We've got 9 node operators managing that stake and validating here. And it looks like we are continuing growing for now, and that node operators we will increase in the set soon as well. I'm going to tell you how Lido works in without any details, but like in an overview, and what's the current state, a bit about the grants program, and what are like where we're getting at with Lido. Going to start from the basics, like what is staking. That's a primitive in crypto economics that works generally like that. Someone needs to lock up capital, then maybe perform some work, maybe expose themselves to some risks, like slashing risks for validating proof of stake protocol, and getting rewards. The middle part is optional for cryptonomics design. The most important part is locking up capital. As we've seen in DeFi Summer, there is absolutely riskless staking as part of like cryptonomics, but it's mostly associated with performing some work and getting some rewards. So what's a liquid staking? Liquid staking removes the locking up capital part from it. Basically dismantles the whole premise, right? So you stake and you get a liquid token that represents your position in staking. So for example, on Ethereum, how it works for Beacon chain. You send Ether to Lido, you get staked Ether. That is a token that represents your share of staked Ether on Beacon chain. That token, it's a rebasable token that changes balance every day. So far, it's generally changing balance slightly upper because we're getting rewards and we don't get slashed yet. So that's how I think it will remain, but the protocol allows for slashing, so the balance can be decreased if that happens on Beacon chain. But so far it's up only. So, and that is a liquid token. It's transferable. You can trade it. You can. Right now we are incentivizing like a tonal liquidity on Curve. The reason for that is that withdrawals are not enabled yet on Beacon chain, and the only way to convert your staked ETH to regular ETH is to sell it on Curve, basically. And we incentivize like 2 billion of liquidity there. You can trade it there to anything you want, or lock up, or in DeFi as collateral. We've got like a few protocols that allow that already, and working on integrating with Maker, Aave, etc. So, and when withdrawals are enabled and Lido is upgraded, you will be able to unstake Ether. If you don't want to sell at the current price, you can just unstake it and get back your Ether. It's not possible right now, but it will be when the protocol, the Beacon chain, will stop changing under us, and will have full features. It's got a pretty respectable APR of 5% on Ether. Not much in DeFi is giving it right now, as no lending protocols, no farming. That's probably we are probably the best farm to get APR at scale on Ether, and that is on token that you can put, for example, in collateral. In Maker will be able. Okay, right now you can put it on Ancient protocol in collateral, get some stable coin, and farm that stable coin to 30% APY more, for example. So that's a yield under your yield, basically, a base layer of DeFi. So what's good about liquid staking? It's DeFi compatible. It's not in the sense for a user. It's also like regular staking with Ether is at odds with DeFi, because if DeFi opens up better opportunities for Ether than staking, it means that less Ether will be staked, because it's not a good economical rational decision to stake. And with staked Ether, with liquid staking, you can combine these things, and they are not conflicting anymore. So liquid staking, unlike the regular delegated staking that we find in most protocols, has less drives for centralization at validation level. So liquid staking protocol tends to concentrate the ether in them and then distribute it between, and they don't have like a natural force that drive them to stake with only one provider. They can distribute it as evenly as possible. That's what Lido does basically. Liquid staking has a natural centralization drive that results in winner takes most dynamics in the liquid staking basically protocol that wins or doesn't win. But under that, on the validation level, it's actually the opposite. It has less centralized drives to stake with like the best provider than most delegation solutions. So there is some value alignment with Ethereum holders. So other holders stake with the staking providers that they find the best one. It's less than self-staking. For example, when you use self-staking, you are very value aligned with Ethereum with the staking because you own the stake and you validate and you are personally responsible for all that happens. Here we have like some kind of principal engine problem. So there is a staker who has the capital. He delegates it to Lido that to be an agent of a user to stake it. And Lido delegates it to node operators. So we have a string of agents that don't own the ETH here. It's somewhat problematic from crypto network perspective. And liquid staking drives the amount of ether stakes up. That's a good force for Ethereum. The thing to understand about liquid staking, it's not limited to Lido and protocols. The simplest possible liquid staking solution that can exist and exist for every stake token out there is staking on exchanges. People send their Ether or Cosmos or Atom or Tezos or whatever to exchange. Exchange stake it, and people can trade it. That's liquid staking. That's very easy to make, much easier than the protocol, and it's very convenient for the user. And that's like the current Ethereum stake distribution. So Lido has about 9.6% of the stake, but like that's all the red parts is custodial solutions. That's how it looks. So I think that if we remove Lido from picture, like if Lido didn't launch, it would look that Ether won't be here, wouldn't be there probably. It would be probably on exchanges or on other liquid staking solutions. So what Lido competes against, what it compares itself to, what choice it provides people is to stake with exchanges or stake with Lido. It's not a competitor to stake them by yourself. I'll talk more about this tomorrow in more details. Let's get to something more positive here. Lido's got a grants program called Lido. The gist of it, it's designed to be extremely lightweighted and frictionless. It works like basically GitHub flow with pull requests and approvals. A couple people can walk through like a grant proposal in 2 hours with all the people who make a proposal. So we incentivize integrations, validator tooling content that is pertaining to Lido or staking or Ethereum or Beacon chain or something. And we have a special program for people who make Lido for other blockchains and protocols. So that's Lido's strategy for decentralization. we think that if there is only one team to do the development work, it won't be decentralized at any time. So when there is only one developer team, that's a natural point for centralization. But for most things, making the same basically product with multiple teams is not a good idea. The exceptions here are like blockchain clients and some other things, but for like staking protocols, that's just stupid. So the strategy here is to get teams to build Lido, like a separate team to build Lido for Polkadot, Lido for Solana. For example, Chorus One, a great validator team, is building one here. So, and they get terms on which they do it, like a big grant or revenue share or something like that. And they have a stable business with Lido and are one of the centers of power there. Does it work? Oh, it's the last slide. Yeah, I didn't say the last. So what's the future for us? We are working right now on more integrations for staked ETH. We are working on further decentralization. Like just recently, we swapped the withdrawal credentials of Lido to execution layer smart contract instead of threshold signature. We are onboarding new node operators soon for Ethereum, and in the like not so far future, the most important topics for us will be implementing withdrawals when Beacon Chain has a stable spec for that, and MEV, like everyone's doing MEV, we decided we want to do that too. Yeah, when after the merge, where the MEV will be extracted by staking pools, and that's something that Lido will probably deep toss in. So that's the plan. Thank you.
So you were talking about MEV.
Yeah.
How do you think, like, can you describe a little bit how the end user will benefit from MEV? How will you distribute the rewards for the end user, for DAO, the DAO treasury, and the providers?
Okay, I'm going to do a curveball here and describe it from the first principles. So MEV in proof of stake world will be very different than proof of work. The reason for that is that proof of stake is basically Ethereum holders deciding how to validate, how to compose blocks. It's no longer a separate entity like miners that may or may not hold ETH, but that's not their profession to hold ETH. Their profession is to basically have some hash power. When proof of stake happens, that's much different. That means that MEV extraction will be much more aligned with Ethereum, with Ether price basically, than in mining context, because that's basically you're mining with Ether. You don't want it to go down. So and that means, for example, for what it means for staking pools. That means that if you extract some MEV and don't distribute it back to stakers, stakers are going to unstake and go to the different staking pool that does exactly that. If you don't extract MEV, that happens again. So they unstake and go to another staking pool that provide them some revenue share. If you extract MEV in a way that's harmful for network, people unstake. You stop doing that. So that means, well, not to be strict, not harmful to the network, but harmful to the Ether price. The things are very close, but a bit different. So that means that decision space here is really tight. What's going to happen with MEV and staking pools? Pools will be collecting MEV in a way that is not harmful to the network and distributed to the stakers mostly. I think that it's going to be organized. It's going to be outsourced because basically the collection will be outsourced because it's two different skill sets to run a node operator and to basically collect MEV. So it work much like with Flashbots right now. Probably with Flashbots. So I think that there will be some revenue share with the software and like arbitrage providers like Flashbots or something. But the gist of it is it's going to happen, it's going to be distributed to stakers, and it won't be too harmful because otherwise the stakers just unstake.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think hot topic, and Tomasz will follow. Another question is on the node provider part. How do you see frictionless node provider onboarding, and what will be, in your sense, kind of decentralized acceptance of one provider in spite of another? Will it be on-chain data like uptime, and so that's how, like, what data will you monitor to onboard new providers? And the other questions is linked. How many providers do you see staking on Lido or validating on Lido in 2 years? Is it 50, 100, 150? And last question linked as well. Like, do you see, user validator, so single validator runner using Lido tomorrow?
I'll try to remember all three. Yeah,
I can remind you, no worries.
Yeah, you'll remind me if I forget something. So for validator onboarding, right now the validator onboarding process, node operator onboarding process in Lido is like very basic. There is a DAO voting that says we've got like 9 slots for node operators, and these 9 slots will be filled by X, Y, Z, etc. So basically a whitelisting by DAO. That's a necessity. It's done like that because right now when you stake ETH, it's basically hostage with a validator. There is no withdrawals. If there were withdrawals, the validators need to initiate them. So until they send the exit message, you can't withdraw. So that Ether is hostage with a node operator. And that's situation that when we started, it was clear that it's going to be for a year or year and a half or maybe 2 years. That's how it's playing out right now. So we needed the set of node operators that are dependable and reputable and great at what they do, and they don't like if there's suddenly a bear market, they don't just exit. They don't say I'm out, I'm going to be like a regular DevOps or something. We had to do a really good whitelist here. When the situation's less dire in this regard, when there is staking pool initiated withdrawals and withdrawals work, and we can restake, it's going to be much better in that regard. The decision space will be wider. So there is no design currently that we, like me personally or other people, think that is best. And there isn't really even a discussion here. We are just sketching different models that can work here. But it's probably going to be some kind of permissionless, gradual step-by-step onboarding process, where when you start, you are allowed to run like one key in a SSV setting, and you well when you first start staking Lido, when you like a single regular staking or something, and to get better, you need to have good performance that is demonstrable on chain, and probably some kind of like risk insurance or something, like people staking with you some tokens that can be splashed if you are slashed or something like that, and some degree of decision making by Ethereum stakers, by other stakers. So if people stake with Lido and say that node operator is great, we want Lido stake with them, that should be also taken into account. So that's a multi-factor system that is combined in some like value function that says that validated, that node operator gets more ether and that one gets less, because that one is trusted and great performance and has some insurance or cover baked in, and that one we don't know anything about them, so they can run like one key in SSV and that's it. So that's how I see it, but like I said, it's not even design, it's a sketch at most.
Okay, very last but not least, like about the peg, ETH, what do you think could be the bigger risk of losing the peg?
I'm I was way more pessimistic about how it will hold up. Honestly, I think that by the time, when launched, I thought that peg would be much less stable for staked, and it would deviate very much from ETH, especially when the market downturn, with sharp drops when people are exiting into stable coins. So I can honestly say I don't have a good read on this. My read on this is way more pessimistic than reality. So I think that risk I thought would be like very realistic for staked ETH peg. They have been realized already when we dropped from either from 4,000 to 2,000 and things like that. But that's that only disbalanced for like less than 1%, I think, 0.5% or something. So what's left is like obvious slashings, smart contract risk, like exploit or something like that. And I think, yeah, that can break the back, but I don't see market breaking it for the time being for now.
I have a question by a show of hands. How many people are using Lido as of now? Okay, so we've got about maybe 10% of the room. Do you have suggestion on what you would like to see on Lido for the coming months, quarters, decades?
Tezos.
More protocol on liquid staking?
So if someone wants to be liquid staking of Tezos with Lido, Ligo's here to fund it, basically. Do that. I'd love to see it flourish here.
Okay, guys, do you have any other questions? I mean, I have a lot, but I think I will ask it afterwards. Yeah, so without further ado, because we also happy to thank you very much, Vasiliy. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Okay, so my name is Tomasz Stanczak. I work on Flashbots team. Also work on a few other projects, including Metamind. So this actually allows to show you some of the prototypes today and some of the work that we've done in the past with Lido, with Metamind, with Flashbots. And this talk will be on MEV on Ethereum 2. So while everything that we've seen before was either at this stage of being on testnet or already operating on a massive scale, MEV on Eth2 is obviously at the stage of researching, prototyping, and experimenting. So I think this one will be slightly more dreamy and going between different potential solutions. And if you want to follow the topic and look for all the other research and ideas that were here, so some examples would be at Eth Research, so Vitalik's proposal on the proposer block builder split. We'll talk about it a bit. Then Eth2 MEV with liquid staking. So the second one is the example of our prototype that we were building together with Lido and Flashbots and Metamind for the Eth Global Hackathon. It was one of the winning projects. And MEV after the merge, so this is the talk from Eth Global presentations. And we explored there are some ideas, and there'll be at least one really fresh thing today that I hope that you enjoy. So as a reminder for some and a good introduction for others on what really differs before the merge and after the merge, where the merge is the merge of Ethereum 1 and Ethereum 2 chains, and acting no longer as separate chains, but as two parts of the system, where one is acting as the execution layer and the other as a consensus layer. So Ethereum 1 becoming execution layer, delivering the blocks, building the blocks, validating blocks, and the Ethereum 2 beacon chain and validators acting as the block proposers and distributing them on the network. So now think about building blocks, selecting transactions, preparing blocks, and running all the state transition changes. But what changes after is how the block is propagated. So either we have the traditional proof of work, Ethereum 1 style distribution, and random statistical assignment of who will be the next block proposer based on the hash power, or the pre-selected validator that we often know a few minutes, 12 minutes in advance, on who will be proposing the block. And maybe as an introduction, so MEV, minor extractable value, which you've heard about already, but why is it important in Ethereum 2? Because it massively changes the revenue of the validators. So this chart actually shows the comparison of the blue line, no MEV, and orange line with MEV, projected revenue of the validator operators. It's a huge difference with like almost twice the revenue flow. There's more detailed numbers you can find in all those presentations. They explored it in details. There were some numbers being run by Justin Drake, by Alex Obadia from Flashbots. So you can find this more detailed. But just to show that it will be a big deal because it massively changes the yields that are achievable in the system after Ethereum 1 will come to play. So maybe first the solution that was suggested by Vitalik on Eth Research. So let's look at it, how it works, and then we'll talk about two things that we explored in Flashbots and prototyped. So first thing is this proposer block builder separation. So you no longer have the vision of one entity acting as block builder and at the same time the one who distributes, proposes the block to the network. But those roles are split, and because they are split, there is suddenly some assignment that the block proposer is the one who is finding the MEV opportunities, and block builder is the one that finds MEV opportunities, and block proposer is the one who later publishes the block after choosing what MEV opportunity is most profitable for the validator. And the idea behind this block proposer, block builder separation was that it will be friendly for untrusted builder, which means you don't want to have the builders of the blocks that are particularly skillful or have to be trusted, have to be bigger than others, because you want to allow the small block builders to participate in a network. So you want to avoid the centralization of block builders. The second thing is untrusted proposer friendliness. So similarly, you don't want to have huge block proposers to have to be trusted, but you want to have lots of smaller block proposers to be equally accessible for the solution. For the weak proposer friendliness, so this is a similar requirement. And then we want to have some simplicity. Don't introduce too many layers over layers, commitments, reveals, slashings, and so on. We want this to behave relatively simple. And as always with MEV, one thing that we really care about is that the bundles, so the MEV opportunities that are being sent and delivered to by the searchers, the arbitragers, that they cannot be stolen, that someone cannot look at it and say, oh, actually, I'll just take it instead as my account, and I include it in the block. And this is a short visualization of those two ideas within the proposer block builder split from Vitalik. So one is assuming that the block builders are sending just the headers, commitments, payments to the block proposers. And then the block proposer selects the best of those headers, the one that promises the best MEV. And then the block builder either publishes the body or not. And depending on that, the fork choice rule changes. The body may arrive, may not, and the block is being broadcasted. The other proposal is slightly different. So the block proposer selects multiple different offered MEV bundles, chooses those headers that promise to pay to the block proposers, and then the bodies are being revealed, and then there is a second round where block proposer is selecting from among the few proposed headers that they committed to before. So they sign, okay, I will choose something from this list, and later when I learn about bodies, I can select one and say this is the one that goes to the network. And we won't really dwell much more on those two, and now we'll go to some ideas that were coming from the research in the Flashbot space. Just to introduce maybe once again, Flashbots. Flashbots has nowadays this system that provides a decentralized, democratized ways of moving MEV outside of miners only and miners private arrangements with the arbitragers, and provides the endpoints for searchers of arbitrage opportunities anywhere to connect to the network, send the bundles, and those bundles being delivered to the miners, and the miners including them in the blocks. And when you think about so far what has been achieved, like miners from these operations, miners got around $110 million already, and the total extracted value is probably around 800 million since the beginning of January. And over 300,000 blocks include on the mainnet in Ethereum the bundles delivered by Flashbots. And I think nowadays 85% of hash rate is Flashbots, 56% of blocks include some Flashbots bundles nowadays, and so on and so on. So those numbers are really, really quite significant on mainnet. And these organizations, I think it's very open with all the research. So if you are interested in participation in the research, there's lots of research opportunities published on the repo. So the first solution that was being explored was the very basic one. We may think of it like as a naive implementation of what works nowadays in Ethereum 1 and moving that to Ethereum 2 space. And we explored it as part of the ETH Global Hackathon. And that was being worked on together with people from Lido team and from Nethermind. So what happens here is you have the searchers that find arbitrage opportunities. They send it to Relay, and the Relay is the same Relay that operates nowadays in Flashbots. Is a centralized service in a way. It can be operated actually by independent relayers, but nowadays really there is a one big Flashbots Relay that handles most of the connection with the miners. Relay collects the bundles, this MEV suggestions from searchers, sends it to the execution layer client, Ethereum 1 client, that simulates all the bundles, verifies how much revenue they bring to the validator, Then as part of this block processing, what happens is we launch something that is called Prism contract that splits the payment into multiple participants. And it allows the MEV value to be paid between the Ethereum 1 node operator, the staking pool, and validators. So stakers, validators, and Ethereum 1 execution layer, depending on the dynamics of how powerful they are in this cooperation. Stakers are the ones that should get the most of the MEV. Maybe it will be validators, maybe it will be the actual block builder, or maybe it will be searchers. So whenever we see MEV, there is this dynamics of who is managing to get the highest value, highest percentage of that MEV split. Even nowadays, it's a searcher miner. In this setup, we went for a most simple split of 1/3 to everyone, but we assume that this is something that market splits later. And after construction of that block, that is being pushed to the validator, and validator publishes it next. And I think I'll spend a bit more time on the second solution, which is practically something that we discussed recently and that we're quite excited about to explore. And we started building prototypes, and I think there is one prototype now in Nethermind repo, but soon there should be one on MEVGAF. And there'll be also coming probably somewhere after EthCC an implementation on the Ethers.js Flashbots provider for this solution. So here, the whole idea is based on something that Jason Pariani proposed, which is using the dev P2P layer for distribution of the MEV bundles. Now, and that's something that we wanted to do for a long time because it feels a bit more right than having this centralized relayer to push the bundles. We wanted to say, oh, the bundles could actually travel the same way as normal transactions. But we were thinking for a long time that traveling as normal transactions actually means kind of normal transactions. We have to provide EIP and introduce a new transaction type to deliver bundles. Why do we want to deliver bundles in some special way? Because we want to encrypt them for specific validators. So we're talking about Ethereum 2. However, later we realized that this solution can be also used even now in Ethereum 1, so we can start testing it very soon. The idea is the searcher knows in advance what validator will be validating the block. So they have a few minutes for that. They prepare the MEV opportunity, and they encrypt the bundle for that particular validator. And then, in a moment I'll show how, but they send it through dev P2P, and that's being picked by different nodes. But the particular validator that knows that it was addressed for them can decrypt it and include it in a block. And what comes together with this solution is that all the validators can register which block builders they accept, which block builders they are trusting, or which block builders satisfy the requirements on how to construct the blocks. And also coming also a bit based on feedback from the staking operators that there might be some arrangements where we want to construct the blocks in a specific way. Maybe not necessarily MEV comes first, maybe there is a set of transactions coming first before MEV, and these rules have to be consistent between validators saying, okay, these blocks are fine for me, and the block builder saying, I cannot really deliver any blocks to validators that won't follow those rules because of my arrangements. So how do we build the transactions that are delivered with encrypted bundles? So we introduce the concept of carrier transaction. And what carrier transaction does, it's absolutely normal transaction. It doesn't introduce a new type of transaction. It runs on the P2P network, and if we send it nowadays, it would be delivered to all the mempool nodes, all the nodes listening to mempool. Why? Because it has the sender, which is valid, it has a valid nonce, and it has a gas price that is covering the cost of transaction. So it's simply passing all the rules that the transaction pool would use for validation nowadays. And where is the bundle? The bundle is encrypted in the call data field, in the data field of the transaction, which means that you pay a bit more for the intrinsic cost of a transaction because all the bytes of the data have to be paid for. So it's a bit more costly, right? Because every searcher has to pay for each transaction they're pushing to the network. But it also solves many problems of the denial of service attacks on the relayers or the miners. So whenever you send a transaction, either someone will unpack the bundle for themselves and discard the shell. They don't even have to include this carrier transaction. Or potentially someone includes a carrier transaction and then maybe later from that block will extract the bundle and include it later. But there is really no chance of losing this transaction. It is paying for itself. And also, if we want to just flood the network, DDoS the network, then someone will say, OK, you're trying to attack it, so we'll include all of those transactions in blocks and we'll have to pay. And with the IP 1559, it means that as you start attacking, you'll be pushing the transaction cost up and up and up. And as for the construction of the blocks, so that thing that I mentioned on the how we create the registry and the validator says, I only accept these block builders, we can create a very simple definition of how the block builder creates the blocks. You can say, this is how I build them. If you want as a searcher to send MEV to me, then maybe I will include first the section in the block space, which will be for a particular partner of ours. Then there will be Flashbots MEV or any MEV. Then maybe I'll include the mempool. And then something that we often talk about, like the second lane of Flashbots, which is privacy only, but it's cheaper because it's not MEV, it's just privacy. So I don't care to be in the front of the block, but I care about being private and not being published anymore. And this is just one example, and there can be a DSL that is publicly available, and everyone can, as a searcher, can verify if I'm OK to work with this validator, if I can find the connection of the validator and a block builder, which I want to use for sending the transaction around. OK. And what else is big in MEV after Ethereum 2? So this is just a hint. This is some bigger exploration that will be happening and I will be researching for sure. It's a multi-block MEV. So nowadays, if you think about MEV extraction, it's all about looking at the mempool and maybe finding liquidations that are just about to happen, looking at the discrepancies in the pricing of multiple decentralized exchanges, finding opportunities to equalize the prices within a single block. But you never have a promise that that your MEV will work over 2 blocks because you don't know upfront which miners will include it. And also there is no transactionality in this. But in Ethereum 2, we have a single validator pool or single validator registered in the registry. We can know in advance sometimes that they got assigned 2 slots in a row, that they'll be creating 2 or 3 blocks in a row, one after another, which means that suddenly we can deliver the bundles that say, please execute this only if you have 2 or 3 blocks in a row, and execute it such that this happens in 1 block, this happens in the 2nd block, and this happens in the 3rd block. And this has the potential of changing entirely some of the DeFi protocols, because they may simply fail in this environment. So what we've explored so far is some of the voting mechanisms may fail, like you can deliver the vote, initiate the vote, and then like win the vote always, and so on and so on. So I think many of the DeFi protocols will be analyzing that more deeply and checking what kind of changes and redeployments they have to provide to avoid potential negative impact of this multi-block MEV. But also, it will be quite exciting to see what kind of positive impact the multi-block MEV can bring to the network. Maybe there can be some like periodical cleaning of some of the protocols that will happen every time this will appear. Okay, and these are my details. And I think here I'm very open to questions.
Are time bandits and reorgs still possible on ETH2?
So I think there is a very fresh piece of research from Georges and Vitalik about reorgs in ETH2 world, because the ETH2 definition of how you do the attestations or how you vote on the blocks make the reorgs much less likely or much less viable. So we generally assume that all this noise about reorg attacks or uncle-based attacks, this is something that mostly disappears or entirely disappears after the merge, and it has only has to be defended against while we're still using proof of work.
I have a question about ethical MEV. So some front-running are quite smart and are ethical and in the alignment with the Web3 ethics, but there is some MEV like sandwiching that is quite bad for the user experience. Does Flashbots have a position on that, or any plans to protect a bit the end user and the newcomers into this ecosystem who are using Uniswap or that kind of broadly used jobs?
Yeah, sure. So there are a few parts of it. Like, so one thing that can be unethical is more like interaction between miners and searchers when miners try to trick the system and steal MEV. Because with the current solutions in Ethereum 1, it's still possible unless there are solutions like SGX. And the one way to approach it is by introducing the code of conduct for miners. And miners particularly care about the reputation of Flashbots nowadays. So actually this one slightly more centralized system that is trusted make it much more safer environment for searchers. This is one place. The other place is looking at the interaction between the searcher and the user of Ethereum, right? So searcher extracting the value together with the miner from the user by sandwiching, by pushing the slippage, and so on and so on. So obviously we see that as the categorization of the bad and good MEV. However, you can start thinking of what kind of problems it introduces when you try to introduce any algorithmical or even worse, manual approach of separating those two. Because you have to start labeling things as good or bad MEV. Like, is it an attack or is it a white hat trying to prevent an attack, right? Because algorithmically, very often it will look exactly the same. Like the white hat moving the funds to their wallet and then announcing that they secure that and then distributing back to the owner will look like an attack. The attacker, it might be harder to find. The sandwich is, you have to introduce some rules that can be then, it's a constant cat and mouse chasing and replacing. So in a way, it ends up feeling much more reasonable to stay neutral wherever it's possible, and assuming that the system, and slowly introduce whatever solutions that work and that can improve the quality of MEV, because it's clearly arbitrage that it's needed that makes the price discovery better operating, that makes all the DeFi protocols to be much more liquid, liquidations to happen, right? We want the liquidations to happen fast without delays, and so on and so on. But it's a tough problem to actually do that automatically. It's like, okay, this is bad. So suddenly we are starting censoring things. Suddenly we start to be an operator. So it introduces all of the legal follow-up of why you actually act and say what is good, what is wrong. So yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, you're falling into the same kinds of critiques of some Web2 social networks that are canceling some politicians or figures, and but could it be community-led with a kind of DAO votes on which operation it could be, I don't know, more expensive to execute, or with implementing something more technical?
I think the best direction here to go is to make sure that the relay itself becomes a service that can be decentralized, that can be replicated and run by independent relayers that will offer different type of protection or decision making, or maybe introduce the DAO on deciding what is right, what is wrong, and what they pass and what not. I think one of the areas of research for us now, which is MEV SGX, allows for the relayer that can be much more trusted because by design it cannot leak the bundle information, which means the searcher remains safe even if they don't trust the relayer because they pass the encrypted bundle. All of this can be verified, then the miner can receive it, can verify it, start mining on it, and only after they deliver proof of work, also based on SGX, they can be sure that they will receive the actual decrypted body. Obviously, it uses SGX, which is also always a bit controversial and introduces some latency, but it's one area of exploration of like how to improve the general decentralization of the service by not requiring this trust layer that currently is with Flashbots. Just Flashbots, it has a lot of trust of both searcher and miner community, and that's why it achieved this like hash rate position now.
Yeah, I have a little follow-up question. So the fact that currently Flashbots only allow including MEV bundles to the start of the block, so it's a technical decision, not political one, right? So currently it disallows to extract, to do a sandwich attack using flash loans because no one can produce 2 blocks in a row. Right? So if you allowed to include bundles not only to the start of the block but to some place of choice, then it could allow sandwich attacks. So is
as for placing the bundles wherever in the block, so the bundles construction actually allows you to include any transactions from the mempool within the bundle. So like the sandwiching is possible in this way. As for, it always happens within a single block. And we start to talk about multi-block MEV because in Ethereum 2 it becomes a big thing. Exactly, because in Ethereum 1 it's unpredictable who will be a producer of next block. Or maybe even we don't consider this like probabilities of the mining pools having so much of the advantage of producing many blocks in a row that this is relevant for Ethereum 1. But in Ethereum 2 it's quite clean. Yes, this will happen.
I see, thanks.
Yeah, just coming back on the multi-block producer MEV. So, how could you prevent bad impact of multi-block MEV, and how can you still allow good impacts of it? And what can you elaborate a little bit more on the good impacts you see?
Yeah. So. I think whenever we construct a DeFi protocol and we think that like, oh, it would be great if I could ensure that it happens one block after another in some specific order, this would be probably good impact. But I wouldn't be able to just bring a good example. But I would love to collect those and hear those being like reported to Flashbots or any of the research materials. Like, if you ever code something and you think that would work really nice if I had control over many blocks, this is the situation. As for how to avoid the negative impact, I think that's a bit like with flash loans. The community and the technology will learn how to build more robust systems and how to prevent this. And this will be like one more checkpoint when designing the DeFi, and one more thing that will make the whole thing more stable in the long term, right? Like, because in a way, if we really push that far, someone could start introduce the strategies like this with a lot of hash power even nowadays.
Got it, thanks.
Thank you. I was just curious, because obviously you guys are doing really amazing work, in the open, in research, which is educating, and like you said, app systems can try to work around making their systems less MEV sensitive and so forth. But how realistic, or I guess also just what sort of things are in the works from what you're learning to make recommendations at layer 1 protocol or layer 2 or any other things that could be a system, that would, whatever extent, reduce MEV exposure, even if it's inside of the pool of the Flashbots and not outside.
So some MEV exposure, I think it's just very natural and will always be there. This is this arbitrage part where the markets get deregulated, and as simple arbitrage, it will always be there.
Yeah,
and
it's actually, that arbitrage is considered valuable, right? Because you're,
any like negative MEV, I think this will be coming with the solutions that built on top of Flashbots infrastructure, MEV infrastructure. Right. So solutions like CalSwap or others who find a way. So I think it's all about what projects will surprise us and say, oh, this is how we solve the things. Like some kind of internal matching engines that avoid slippage on the protocols and so on and so on. So this education happens like showing searchers how to be more efficient, but also showing builders and sponsoring the hackathons and sponsoring the teams that are building on top of MEV, and particularly promoting those projects that show how to make the systems better and the bad MEV not to happen. Also, I think being very active and showing that as an organization that Flashbots actually really cares about the health of the protocol. So I think there was lots of consideration taken into account when we started talking about the reorgs and showing how much effort we put into showing what defense mechanisms can we build, how quickly can we realize, construct a research effort with top researchers that will tell how we defend, how much time we have, where we go next, what we should keep on the shelf just in case there are any of the reorg operations from miners and so on. Because we consider this is harmful for the protocol. Very deep analysis says we go this way, and it's like a negative sum game. Yeah, so it's a combination of the research effort, the research collective, inviting more researchers to the space, hackathons funding, and educating.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges for reducing MEV, right, is that it's definitely a public good. By definition, you're removing money from the table that somebody who's looking to build a business around.
Yeah, I think the community in the end actually like maybe people when they given like freedom of the protocol, then solo they want to act as like okay, that's laying on the table. But whenever we start talking about as a community on something that lays on the table, but it feels a bit more like a bad MEV, then as a community we immediately will think about how to remove it. And actually there's an agreement that anything that strengthens the protocol and makes it more desirable for users is actually something that is long-term valuable.
Yeah.
So I think this challenge, luckily, in this Ethereum community as it is now, seems to be something that we deal with quite well.
Thank you very much.
So I was just wondering about the latest thinking on multi-block inclusion in that sense, and what are the criteria that are kind of being considered as part of the same as part of the
sorry, I cannot hear because
the multi-bundle inclusion. Sorry, as part of
multi-bundle inclusion.
Sure. Yep.
So that was something that was introduced in Flashbots version 0.2.
Sure.
And so what are the criteria of multi-bundle?
So I was just wondering, I seem to recall that it was almost being done on a greedy basis, if one might call it that, in terms of the inclusion based on the value extracted as well as the gas limits in some sense.
So it's more like quite a simple extension of a single bundle. So you compare the value to the miner of a bundle as compared to the tail of the block, and as long as the bundles keep improving the miner's revenue, they'll be included. However, the miner has a chance to choose how many of the bundles to include in the block and how much of the block space to take. And this really doesn't differ whether it's Ethereum 1, Ethereum 2. And as for criteria on in what order they have to be included, they cannot really affect each other. So it has to be that the first bundle doesn't cause any difference in the revenue of the second bundle. So they have to be like disjoint, and they sort it in it. And most of the miners will run something like 3 to 5 maximum number of bundles to be included in a block. Does it answer your question? Because I missed some
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I was just wondering if there were any particular criteria or optimizations that were
There was lots of discussion. So I think hours and hours of discussions around how to store the bundles and how to simulate them, because it introduces latency potentially if sorted perfectly. But some naive algorithms actually were giving quite good results. So what's the latest one? The one that was applied actually brings some quite impressive improvement over. Like there was a lot of discussion recently about did the multi-bundle affect gas prices a lot on Ethereum? Did it bring the gas prices a lot down because of price gas auction participants not participating for the block space priority anymore, because they no longer had to hope that, no longer were fearing that if they miss the single bundle in a block, then for sure they'll be excluded, and that every single additional bundle in a block decreases the push for the gas prices growing because of those wars between different bots operating on the network. So I've seen some very convincing calculations on this ones.
That's interesting, yeah. It's especially about the simple optimizations being the best. So that's pretty cool. Thanks.
So are there any like concrete examples of MEV opportunities that can like utilize the multi-block thing? And then also, how is it guaranteed that both transactions will be included in separate blocks? Because I could see like ways that miners could exploit that.
So the actual construction doesn't exist yet. We simply mentioned that the multi-block MEV will be probably something big, and that we really invite people to explore it, research, and give examples. I think that one potential solution to ensure that both transactions are included is that you only make a payment to the miner if you can verify that the state in the second block is as expected after the first block. So one can introduce the conditional execution, and then the miner or validator can simulate both blocks in a row and check if that payment happens, and then they can compare the bundles. So it happens the same way as simulation of a single block nowadays in Ethereum 1, but in Ethereum 2, what will be needed, every bundle that spans over multiple blocks will have to be simulated over multiple blocks. And then it's guaranteed that the first one doesn't really provide any value if executed by itself, like doesn't unlock the opportunity. And there are some risks as the bundle will be split by the validator, the same way as nowadays. Like the validator or miner could potentially split the bundle into chunks and act maliciously against the searcher, against this like code of conduct. But this remains unchanged.
And also, how much of MEV is going to the searchers versus the miners, and how does that like differ depending on the opportunity?
So this is an interesting question, because I was checking. There are two dashboards available for Flashbots. One is called explore.flashbots.net, and the other one is called dashboard.flashbots.net, and they show. They give insights into multiple statistics about the network behavior and also like the searcher operations. And I'm yet to confirm the number that I've seen today on this dashboard, because it was introduced recently, which shows 83% going to searchers. And I can't believe that, because in our internal conversations, there were totally opposite numbers. That they mentioned that 7% goes to searchers and 93% to miners. So I wouldn't like to confuse you. This is something to check on the dashboards in the soon future, because many people are asking actually what the split is. And we really wonder what it will be in Ethereum 2, like how much of the value validators will take. My intuition is that the validators will end up with like 90x% of the value, but it might be different.
Cool. Does anyone else have a question?
Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry, we just got here, so I don't know if it's been discussed. Why do you think Ethereum doesn't take steps to actually eliminate the minor extractable value?
I simply think it's not something that can be eliminated, because it's natural. It's like in traditional markets, MEV always exists. And as for this considered bad, evil MEV, which is related to the protocols allowing for the like sleepage push and so on, the community wants that to be removed, and there will be work to do that. It's just sometimes very challenging to remove it. So everyone wants it to be removed.
But it's not that challenging. If you think of some other protocols that mark transactions as they come in, so you don't let the reorder happen when they get picked up from the mempool. I mean, you could technically remove or at least limit it quite a lot. So
we've seen examples, and maybe coming to one of the questions before, like layer 2 and sidechains and so on. So on layer 2, there were approaches with VDFs and so on, like saying that the transaction ordering has to happen blindly and then it has to be followed. It actually leads to many, many other complications. There are like increased latency to the transaction execution. And also there is still some possibilities of generate multiple things in parallel and pick the best one. It's being explored. Yeah, like any research opportunity like to give those further exploration. I don't think this is possible without big compromise on like the quality of the protocol and its swiftness and how quickly it operates. But things will be introduced. There will be multiple teams working on it and improving. And when we see sequencers on layer 2, they are centralized. They can extract MEV themselves, right? So does it mean that they remove MEV? No. I think we've seen this announcement now from Optimus saying that until decentralized, the sequencer on Optimus will be collecting MEV value and distributing it to the community, to protocols. A bit like putting it into charity on this like retroactive community funding, the public good funding. So these are examples of what people are exploring. They want to remove MEV, or at least they want to use it well by the time it's removed.
Thank you.
Wow. That was quite intense. Thank you very much, Tomasz.
Thank you very much.
So for the light kids in the classroom, unfortunately we have to wrap up. I think tonight was quite amazing. Hearing from SSV, decentralized validation on staking, Eth2, from Lido, liquid staking, Vasiliy, and obviously Tomasz from Eth2 MEV and what's the future MEV on Ethereum. Again, like we are SkillZ, we company that run validators on Eth2. We support Lido. We're one of the 9 providers supporting Lido, and we also staking for enterprises and any people that want to stake Eth2. And many of our team were here tonight, and I think we were kind of mind blown by what we saw. So I hope other people in the audience had the same feeling. So thank you again very much for coming.